was lying on the hotel bed. CEO David leaned down and kissed her neck and then kissed her lips. The next morning, David had to leave early due to some matters. Before leaving, he gently kissed Alice on the forehead and took her necklace as a token of their love. He left her a note, but the note accidentally fell under the bed. Soon after, Alice was woken up by noise. She saw her fiancé Bruce and Rose entering the room. Rose, Alice's half-sister, accused Alice of cheating and sleeping with another man the previous night. Bruce angrily grabbed her arm, blaming her for being unfaithful to him. Alice saw the hickey on her neck and panicked, as she had no memory of what happened the night before. She suspected that Rose had drugged her, but Rose denied it. Bruce planned to break up with Alice and announce at their engagement party that Rose would be his fiancée. After Bruce left, Rose mocked Alice, saying, "How did it feel to sleep with an old and ugly man last night?" Alice was furious, but Rose provoked her further. In reality, Bruce had been cheating on Alice with Rose for some time, but he didn't know how to break up with Alice, so he and Rose had schemed together for this plan. Assistant Tom informed David that the woman he had a one-night stand with would be getting married to someone else at the restaurant today. David decided to head to the restaurant immediately. At Bruce and Rose's engagement party, Alice burst in wearing a wedding dress. She uploaded a video of Bruce cheating on her with Rose to social media, leaving everyone stunned. In the video, Bruce admitted to the affair and to hiding the truth from Alice, deceiving her all along. Bruce's mother slapped Rose, accusing her of seducing Bruce. She demanded that her son apologize to Alice, knowing how much Alice was cherished by her billionaire father and that they couldn't afford to offend her. Reluctantly, Bruce apologized, but Alice shook his hand off and refused to reconcile. She publicly declared, "Everyone can see now that I dumped Bruce today. I wish him and Rose a long life together." With that, she turned and left, raising her hand in a final wave to the guests. Though she pretended to stay composed, she broke down in tears once she entered the elevator. At that moment, David got out of his luxury car and walked into the hotel. Inside, he ran into the distraught Alice, but she didn't recognize him as the man she had a one-night stand with. After apologizing to him, she walked away. David's assistant Tom had arrived early at the engagement party. Having never seen Alice before, he assumed the bride was Alice. He approached Rose and said, "Madam, my boss David sent me to take you home." Rose was puzzled, but Tom showed her a necklace and asked her if it belonged to her. The necklace was indeed Rose's, which she had accidentally left in the hotel room the night before. Tom told her that the person who wanted to marry her was the local billionaire, David. Rose was so happy and immediately agreed. Bruce's mother tried to stop Rose from leaving, but Rose boldly said, "I'm David's fiancée now. Who dares to stop me?" Then she arrogantly walked away. Alice sat on the side of the road, drinking in frustration, shouting, "I actually slept with an old and ugly man last night." David approached her and asked, "Who said I'm old and ugly?" Alice suddenly grabbed his pants and said, "You might be good-looking, but this is none of your business." She tried to leave, but David wrapped his arms around her waist, saying, "How is this not my business? I'm the man you're insulting." He intended to take Alice with him, but she suddenly vomited on his suit. David picked up the drunk Alice with one arm and carried her to the hotel. Rose arrived at David's house, where the servants were gathered at the entrance to welcome her. As she stepped into the villa, she immediately noticed many priceless antique vases. She ordered the servants to bring out the most expensive clothes and jewelry for her to choose from. Maria, the housekeeper, noticed her greedy demeanor and remarked, "How could the boss like a woman like her?" Assistant Tom also grew suspicious and decided to call David. However, before David could say a word, Alice hung up his phone. She cupped his face and kissed him twice. David couldn't control himself anymore. He pinned her onto the bed and kissed her passionately. The next morning, Alice was leaning against David's chest, dreamily stroking his muscles. When she opened her eyes, she realized she was lying in the arms of a strange man. Letting out a scream, she hurled a pillow at David. Suddenly, Alice's memories of the previous night came flooding back. She had clung to David, kissed him forcefully, and even straddled him, declaring, "You're mine." David had been utterly stunned at the time, but Alice had hugged him tightly and kissed him for a long time. Overcome with embarrassment, Alice wanted to run away, but David pulled her back into his arms. He told her, "Not only did we sleep together last night, but the night before as well." My name is David Smith, and I'm your first man, and your last." David was preparing for a business trip abroad. He grabbed Alice's hand, wrapped his arm around her waist, and said, "Go abroad with me." But Alice pushed him away and hid under the covers, telling him, "What happened between us was just a one-night stand. You don't have to take responsibility." David replied, "The night before last, you wouldn't let go of me and said you'd take responsibility for me." Alice suddenly remembered how she had clung to David 2 days ago, pouting as she tried to kiss him. David had pushed her away, saying, "I don't like frivolous and irresponsible women." But Alice had replied, "I'll take responsibility for you." After hearing her words, David had kissed her passionately on the spot. Alice told him, "I'll keep my promise to take responsibility for you. But I don't want to go abroad. I'll wait for you to come back." David took off his ring and put it on her finger. He wrote down his home address on a note and told Alice to wait for him there. He gently touched her head and kissed her forehead, making her heart race. Wearing the ring, Alice went to David's house. When Rose heard about it, she finally realized that the woman who had spent the night with David was Alice. That night, Rose got Alice drunk, but in the process, Alice accidentally yanked off Rose's necklace. Desperate to maintain her luxurious life, Rose lied and said, "Alice is my sister. She came here to return the ring, which is the token of David's love for me." She ordered her assistant to retrieve the ring and kick Alice out. However, when Rose got the ring, she found that it wouldn't fit her finger. Tom asked why she couldn't wear it, and she lied again, claiming she had recently gained weight. Alice was furious after being kicked out. She cursed David as a liar. Just then, David called, and as Alice was about to answer, she was suddenly dragged into a car. It turned out that her grandmother had sent people to bring her back home, forcing her to marry Bruce. This was because her grandmother had received a call from Rose, who had tearfully complained that Alice's scandalous broken engagement had made it impossible for her to marry David, the richest man. Rose had said the only way to resolve the situation was for Alice to marry Bruce as soon as possible to quell the public uproar. Feeling sorry for Rose, her grandmother decided to force Alice into marriage. Despite Alice's firm refusal, her grandmother wouldn't let her leave and had her imprisoned. Alice called her friends for help, but all of them refused. Feeling desperate, she dialed David's number, only to find it unreachable. She was utterly hopeless and cried out, "I will never trust you again. You're a huge liar." At that moment, David was being forced by his grandfather to go on a blind date. Seeing Alice's missed call, he decided to return it, but it didn't connect. His grandfather, curious about who David was calling, leaned in and saw the contact name, "My future wife." His grandfather immediately instructed someone to investigate which woman had recently appeared in David's life, eager to meet this future granddaughter-in-law. Soon, David's assistant Tom told him, "Your woman has moved into the villa." David felt relieved, not realizing that the person who had actually moved in was Rose. A month later, Alice was forced to marry Bruce, but she pushed his hand away and firmly said, "I won't marry him." She told her father, "Actually, I want to marry another man." When her father asked who that man was, she replied, "I want to marry David Smith." Bruce's mother burst into laughter, thinking Alice was lying. That was when Alice realized that the man she had spent the night with was the wealthiest man in the city. Her grandmother slapped her hard across the face and scolded her for shamelessly trying to steal her sister Rose's boyfriend. David's assistant, Tom, arrived with many expensive gifts, telling everyone, "I'm here on behalf of David Smith and his fiancée, Rose, to deliver gifts." Alice was shocked and couldn't believe she had unknowingly become the other woman. Reflecting on the sweet memories she had with David, her heart ached because she had thought that David was just toying with her. She declared in front of everyone, "I will keep my promise, but I won't marry Bruce. I want to marry his cousin, Mike. If Mike doesn't want to marry me, then our family's engagement will automatically be canceled." Bruce's mother angrily shouted at Alice, saying Mike would never marry her. But just then, Mike's voice rang out, "I'm willing to marry Alice." Mike walked in and Alice was surprised, thinking he had been living abroad for years. He took her hand and said, "I accept your proposal." David finally returned from his business trip. Rose, wearing a wig to imitate Alice and using the same perfume, lay on the bed and turned off the lights. When David entered the room, he saw the silhouette of a woman on the bed. He changed into his robe and walked closer to her. Rose, in a soft voice, called out, "David, is that you?" But David stood still, motionless. She reached out to touch his body and asked, "Why aren't you responding to me?" David coldly asked, "Who are you?" Rose pretended not to understand and embraced his waist. He grabbed her hand forcefully and pushed her onto the bed. Turning on the lights, he called an assistant Tom and asked, "Is this the person you found?" Tom replied, "I followed your instructions exactly. That necklace really is hers." David walked up to Rose, took off her wig, and said, "Even if you wear a wig and use the same perfume, you still don't smell like her. You're nothing like her." He ordered Tom to immediately throw Rose out. Tom also provided a crucial piece of information. The person you're looking for might be Rose's sister, Alice, because she came to deliver the ring that day. She's getting married today. David rushed to the wedding venue, while Rose tried to explain to him outside the car, but he ignored her. Rose tripped and fell, and coincidentally, David's grandfather saw her. He mistook Rose for the woman David loved. At the wedding, Mike wanted to kiss Alice, but she turned her face away. Just then, David's voice rang out, "I don't approve of your marriage." He burst into the room with his bodyguards and reached out his hand to Alice, signaling her to come to him. But Alice was still angry at him, so she refused to go. David walked up to her and asked, "Didn't you say you would take responsibility for me? Why are you marrying someone else?" Guests murmured about their relationship. Alice's grandmother fainted from anger and was rushed to the hospital. Alice stayed in the hospital, taking care of her grandmother until late at night. When she came out of the ward, she bumped into David. He wrapped his arm around her waist and stared at her, but just then, Mike walked in and saw them. Alice quickly pushed David away and told Mike, "David is my brother-in-law. He's just here to visit my grandmother on behalf of my sister." David, slightly irritated, grabbed her hand and asked, "Who said I'm your brother-in-law?" Mike demanded David to let go, but David replied, "Alice is about to be my wife, and we have private matters to discuss." With that, he pulled Alice away. David tried to explain to Alice, but she didn't believe him. Suddenly, she felt nauseous, and David quickly picked her up to see a doctor. The doctor informed them that Alice was 1 month pregnant. They were shocked. Meanwhile, another doctor informed David's grandfather that Rose was 2 months pregnant. She knew she was pregnant with Bruce's child, but David's grandfather mistakenly thought it was David's child. He comforted Rose and promised that he would never allow David to abandon her. Alice's father was shocked when he learned she was pregnant. He asked her who the father of the child was, but Alice refused to say. Her father insisted on taking her for an abortion, but Alice told him she could raise the child on her own. Still, he insisted. Just then, Mike showed up, saying he wanted to marry Alice and go get their marriage certificate today. To escape the situation, Alice took Mike's arm and left. Her father assumed she was pregnant with Mike's child. At a cafe, Alice apologized to Mike for using him twice to get out of trouble, and she told him she was pregnant. But Mike said, "I don't mind that you used me, and I don't mind that you're pregnant. I'll treat your child like my own. Alice, will you marry me?" She was stunned and didn't know how to respond. But David suddenly wrapped his arm around her shoulder and said, "Thanks for your kindness, but I can take care of my wife and child." Mike remembered how, when Alice was little, her grandmother had called her a jinx, saying she had caused her grandfather and mother's deaths, so her grandmother had insisted on sending her away to the countryside. Mike had been her good friend back then, but when he went to look for her, Alice had already been taken away. When he saw Alice again after growing up, she had become Bruce's fiancée. David took Alice for a prenatal checkup and found that she was malnourished. He said, "I'll arrange for the best nutritionist to take care of your health. I'll make sure to take care of you and the baby." Alice was torn, but she was once again moved by his sincerity. David put a ring on her finger and said, "Let's start over." Before Alice could respond, David's grandfather interrupted them. He had brought Rose in for a checkup. The grandfather scolded David for being irresponsible toward Rose, but David ignored him, holding Alice's hand and leaving. His grandfather pretended to faint to stop him. Rose told Alice, "I'm pregnant with David's child. Can you give him back to me? The doctor said I'm carrying twins, and if I have an abortion, I might be in life-threatening danger." Alice looked at her prenatal report, both shocked and heartbroken. Later, she told her grandmother, "I didn't go to get a marriage certificate with Mike this morning. We broke up." Her grandmother was furious, slapped her, and threw a thermos box at her head. David caught her, gently touched her face and comforted her. Alice's grandmother tried to justify herself, but David picked Alice up and left without a word. He took her back to his house, gently treated her wound, kissed her forehead, and said goodnight. Alice was conflicted, pulling the ring from her pocket, unsure whether she should trust David. The next day, Rose scolded Alice for stealing her boyfriend and even tried to hit her. But Alice grabbed her hand and warned her not to push her luck. Rose pretended to fall and bled heavily, almost miscarrying. She told David's grandfather that Alice had deliberately pushed her down in an attempt to make her miscarry. His grandfather was furious. Despite Alice defending herself, he still forced her to kneel and apologize to Rose. Alice suddenly bled and said, "My baby." David rushed in and saw her unconscious. He angrily accused his grandfather of going too far, but his grandfather believed he had done nothing wrong in protecting Rose. David picked Alice up and told his grandfather, "I've never touched Rose, and Alice's baby is mine. You almost killed your great-grandchild." Outside the emergency room, David told his grandfather that Alice had been mistreated after losing her mother, but she had still kept her kind heart. The grandfather was deeply remorseful. After the emergency, the doctor informed them that both Alice and her baby were out of danger. After Alice woke up, she said to David, "This is the end for us." He silenced her with a kiss, but she pushed him away. He kissed her again. After the kiss, David said, "We will never end." He ordered his bodyguards to bring in Rose and Bruce. Bruce told Alice that Rose was carrying his child. Assistant Tom informed Rose that there were security cameras in the villa, and he had posted the footage online. Now, everyone knew that Rose had deliberately fallen and framed Alice. Her reputation was completely ruined. Rose, who had been living beyond her means for a long time, was in massive debt. However, David refused to pay off her debts. Rose knelt, begging her grandmother to help her, but she owed $1 billion, and her grandmother could not afford that much. At that moment, David's grandfather arrived with a generous dowry, proposing that Alice marry David. Rose was excited because she hoped to use the dowry to pay off her debts. But David's grandfather told them that Rose could not use the dowry, or he would freeze the entire amount. Rose's grandmother nearly fainted from anger. Mike gathered his courage and proposed to Alice once again, but she refused. Then she saw David nearby, so she smiled and ran over to hug him. He kissed her and put a ring on her finger. Alice asked him if he was jealous, and he replied, "Yes, I am jealous. So, never leave me again." After saying this, he lifted her up and took her home.